We will call for Tuesday, October 20th, a work session, special meeting. Pretty much only one thing on the agenda, but I need an approval of that agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First item is our public comment time. Anybody in the house have a public comment? I don't have anybody listed for an online public comment, so we will move on. Our discussion for tonight is ongoing assistance to the businesses. Bruce, do you want to catch us up?
Yeah, as I get started, I just want to tell Jim, anytime you want to jump in on any of these, you've seen the memo, right?
Yeah.
Got you, yes, okay, or an email, but anything that you, any changes or whatever, just hold up or whatever, okay? All right, first, there's something, a note here about the being able to assist the nonprofits. The city has generally, for several years, appropriated $90,000 for grants to nonprofits. Those $90,000 have been determined by the Parks and Community Services Group, and that's been forwarded to your November meeting. But there was, again, discussion that the nonprofits as well as the regular businesses are all facing challenges. As it happens, the city budgeted $926,000 and change for our first quarter revenue. And that was being very conservative, as you remember when we were doing the budget. As it happens, it appears that we're being told by the lodging industry that they're having, can you hear me okay, Russ?
Just fine.
That the lodging industry is having a year that may be close to what they had in the 1920 budget. And that totals, the collection of those totals was over 2 million. So it's possible, and we won't know until October 30th, because that's the deadline for everybody to report and send their funding. It's possible that we could have 1.1 million more than what we had budgeted in our very conservative budget. And so there's a possibility that if the council wants to take a portion of those funds to for additional grants to nonprofits, we do have money. We clearly have a group that knows how to do it in the Parks and Community Services. And so that's a choice that you can make. That is an option for you that we didn't know for sure that we would have. Another thing that was talked about was some kind of window covering or something with inside the windows of the businesses that have left. And in our opinion on that, it's because you're dealing with private sector and you're dealing with the building owners. We thought that this would be something that might be better managed by the chamber. And the only restriction that we think that we have is whatever would be put in the windows could not be advertising for business. So it can be a picture, but not, Eat at Joe's kind of a thing. Jim, do you have anything on that?
Well, the only thing, it would be having a conversation with the building owner is what it would come down to, and putting up those recommendations and seeing what the owner of the building agrees to or doesn't agree to. So it's really just a conversation to be had, I think, from that standpoint.
What is that meant to do? I mean, what's that? The stores are gone, so.
It doesn't look empty.
It would remind me a little of the marijuana shops that aren't able to have a see-through window, might have a pretty scenery.
Yeah, that's it. In a lot of places, just, the business automatically do that in malls and things like that. That store leaves, they decorate the windows until somebody comes in.
The other thing that I might add to that would be if we could make those available to residential artists. The artist could put his name on the work, but not advertise where it's being sold or anything like that. That would be a little Just so that somebody who doesn't have an outlet might be able to do something. I don't know. That would
That's a
be-
great idea.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, even if they didn't fill it, if they just did the space like a gallery, kind of, hanging pictures across. That's,
Lots of options,
pardon?
lots of options.
Yeah. The next one I think is probably more towards a chamber. And that was a menu book with takeout options for visitors who are staying in the hotels. So they don't have to look up each restaurant individually on their phone, and kind of does a reminder that we have these restaurants right by you, as opposed to restaurant near me and it might be Seaside or someplace else. Another was to direct TAC funds to support the efforts in advertising this winter season. Again, we didn't get the number for the 70% of 1%, but we anticipate that the amount that we budgeted for TAC, for the TAF funds, will come in significantly higher than what we put into the budget. And so it's possible that there will be more funds. I think that we anticipated there would be a little bit more than half, like $290,000 available. And but the previous year we had budgeted or projected like 440,000. So we anticipate, and most of our funds come in quarter one. And that's what it's our quarter one, which is July to the end of September. So it is possible that there'll be more funds than we'd anticipated in the TAC fund. TAC is meeting on October 21st, which is tomorrow, at 1. And they're going to be talking about the grants that they have now. And if you have any questions or suggestions, if you would like us to carry to them, we can do that if you'd like it to be brought up. But last discussion we had, we didn't have all this information. And so they are right now, based on the grants that came in, they are operating under the 292,000. And as they usually do, they're not going the full amount. So, and those same funds could potentially be available for the money that's coming in from the county for from the jail project. That's 70%. And also hopefully it'll bolster what we're going to be sending to the chamber. So we want to be careful because we don't know what the next 3 quarters are going to bring, but it's nice to have a good start, have a successful biggest quarter we usually have. So those funds potentially could be available. Next one is, and do you want to talk about these as we go, or just go through them all first?
Either.
Go through them first and then.
Let's go through them first. Okay, yeah, thank you. All right, next one is the relief of the 14-day restriction for short-term rentals to allow the unrented weekends to be filled. Discussion was about, especially during the holidays. And from what we're being told, it tends to bring in families versus couples who might be using hotels. Possibly a little bit of a different clientele for pedestrian traffic for retail and restaurants. It was not being recommended that we do this during next summer. It would be up until a date that you determine. It might be May 15th, it might be April something if you were to do it. And there does seem to be a restriction on its own in that they are not able to get enough people to be able to just turn these quickly. I think it's something that some of the hotels are saying that they're having to. So that is a potential, a little bit of a throttle on the number of rentals. The next is provide designated takeaway parking in specific areas downtown to increase convenience for pickup business. This is possible. We need to determine the locations. And Jim, if council decides to go with this, I think we would just ask the particular restaurants to contact us, and then we could try to work something out with them.
And downtown has kind of the time limited areas already, so those spots are kind of predetermined.
Yeah.
But it's coordinating that with the businesses, like if you're doing takeout, that's where you would go to deliver. The idea is having people pull up, say I'm here, they can deliver the items out to them rather than having to get out and have that interaction in town. They don't know if that's the same in the Midtown area as far as designated parking locations or not. So that might be more to figure out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a coordinated effort, I think,
Mhm.
more so than having to do a whole bunch of change to the parking ordinances.
Okay. All right, we talked about tents to improve outdoor seating. We seem to have had an option with canopies that were open on 4 sides. A little bit of bad weather kind of changed that. If we want to use, we do actually have canopies we could loan from the farmer's market. If restaurants wanted to rent or borrow those, that would be approved by council. But the condition we would have is you would take them down each night, not, pack them up, and then they would not potentially sustain damage. Next one is street closures. And there was discussion about closing Hemlock or Second, and then to allow a large tent or, in or across the street to create an indoor dining area. And as Councilor Risley pointed out, we would still be restricted to whatever the number is to allowed in even if it's a soft structure as opposed to a regular structure, you still have to meet all of the requirements. It could also be used as a test time or a test study for closing Hemlock. One thought that might not work exactly because our pedestrian traffic is so low this time of year. It really wouldn't mirror what we would see if we did it under crowded conditions. If the city were to set up a centralized location, has been suggested, somebody would need to make sure that we were not exceeding the state mandated seating limitations, and that we maintain the ability to provide ongoing custodial and cleanup arrangements that meet COVID standards. So that means every time we turn a table, it would have to be cleaned the way that it was supposed to be cleaned. And, that means pretty much somebody on site all the time. The cost of that, we had no discussion. We really didn't talk about that as a requirement, but that will have some semi-significant cost associated with that. We would have to sort out who would be bearing the responsibility of that cost. There was a suggestion that we develop an abbreviated process for permitting covering outdoor areas for restaurants. It would be more permanent than tents. And a time frame suggested was like 4 or 5 years or something, so it would be worthwhile to make the investment. Our thought on that is that there really is a process now. If you want to do something like that, we would just take it through. It might take a month or two. Jeff might be scratching his head and saying, no way, it would ever be that fast. But that would involve doing a code review and then probably DRB. And so I don't think that we would waive any other building standards, anything like that. And so we're thinking that we should probably keep things the way they are for anything that is permanent or semi-permanent to make sure it gets the appropriate review. And Jeff has done some research. It may be possible for professional tent companies to provide a more weather-resistant option. And they stake the structures down, and they can take more wind and things like that. So that may be an option for the people that are trying to have outdoor seating. Again, we would have to review it. If somebody came in and says, I've got a tent company coming in, then that would be, Jeff working with them to see what we could pull together. Another was to open up the school property for additional parking near town. My comment here was, I'm not sure additional parking will be the problem during the off season. And the other thing is we've been dealing with vandalism there. And so I'm not sure if we want to introduce more people into the area. So those are both considerations. Talked about a virtual passport for visitors to check in on specific locations. I forgot the details on it, but I did put down that that was probably more of a chamber function. A local business coupon book, again, probably chamber. And a menu book for local restaurants, and I think we talked about that possibly on the first page. So those were some of the things that were talked about. I am disappointed that none of us were able to come up with a magic bullet. I think that we've got some things that will, could potentially make incremental improvements, but we don't have something that's going to make, everything good. So anyway, if there's any questions, either of me or Jen, if you want to start again at the top and go through them. Tim, I'll let you handle that part.
First, my comment is I don't think it's possible to have a magic bullet that would solve this problem. But it is definitely an incremental thing. We can do all kinds of little things that help in little bits. So I'll just run through some of the ones that I made some notes on. All of the funding aspects, I think I'd like to really get hard numbers, but I'm really comfortable with maybe looking at those, both the assistance for the nonprofits and TAC fund. I think the window, if, like Jim was saying, that if landlords are willing to make that opportunity for folks to put something in the window, I think that'd be a great idea. There's only a few actual storefront locations that I think are that obvious, and Sandpiper mostly. So
Sam, should we take each topic at a time and have everybody talk about it? Because otherwise we might lose everyone's thoughts.
go ahead.
No, you're
I did,
doing it, but
let's take on the assistance for nonprofits then. Any other comments on that?
I'm definitely in support of that. I agree with you, Sam, that I'd like to know what it is that we're dealing with budget wise. And
we'll know that October 30th.
yes, and then that's just to refresh my memory. We need to treat that as, what is it, 1% of?
That is the accumulation of the first, I forget if it's 5 or 6, 100%, and then several that we only get 30%. So that number was the total that would go to the general fund out of those sources after you pull the 70% out.
Okay.
I think Lori's going to have to give us some clarification on this too, because this is clearly budget changing numbers. So she might have to do a whole, what she calls it, adjustment of some kind.
It could require a budget amendment.
And that's, thank you.
And I think that this is something that we can bring to the November regular meeting for your considered as an update.
I think a couple of things there. The nonprofits, we'd like to help them, there's no doubt. The city also has its requirements that we've been putting off. And those that are available for the general fund, I'd like to make sure we don't lose sight of that, but benevolence. And then there's the process of determining how much the nonprofits get. We've gone through a whole process with a certain amount budgeted. Now, there may be a larger amount available. I think we need to think about, do we just turn that over to the TAC committee and say, you guys figure it out? Or are there some guidelines that we'd like to see? I know nobody got what they were asking for.
No, far from it.
So I suspect we
It
don't,
was close with a few of them,
some were close,
with the smaller dollar amounts.
but I don't think we need to go back out, asking people to submit a new request. I think the requests are there. So I guess my view is the first pass, we ought to take a look at what would it really be to meet everybody's requested amount? And how would that impact our budget and our available numbers as a first step? We may decide The TAC committee may say, well, some of those, there's no way you're going to give that much. But TAC ought to at least take a look at it and see if they knew they had more funding, how might they have changed what they want to do? And then we look at what's available and make some adjustments on that basis.
And Mike, this process is managed by Parks and Community Services.
Yeah, I meant the grants. I always say the TAC, but
Get them all mixed up.
it's for the,
I've always thought that there were some nonprofits that didn't ask for help too. So that might be something where we could ask if there were people outside of the normal, 19 or whatever there are, that might come forward.
you're right. I always wonder why they don't submit a request to the Parks and Community Service.
Like the library doesn't, because they are part of general fund now. And so different.
Others, you kind of thought they would have, they've done it in the past. But anyway, if we can let the Parks Community Service Grant Committee take a look at that and follow the same philosophy as I was misnaming the committee.
Would it make sense that if you decide to do this, and you set an amount, say, at least starting the process on the 3rd, or we might go through the budget amendments or whatever, would you want to set the parameters, or would you want to say, we're doing another allocation towards this, and y'all sort out how you want to do it? Because I just think that they're closer to those groups and talk to them maybe more.
My sense would be that we need to look at the actual numbers. We also need to look at some of the other things that we need funding for. And figure out a value range that I would ask the Parks Committee to say, okay, if you had this much, how would you do it? That's where I would go with it.
Yeah, I'm just concerned if we,
Get a recommendation from them, and then we can give them a final amount.
I don't want to put ourselves in a box by saying, you get all this, and then say, oh, wish we hadn't done that. So it's an iterative process. Parks Committee.
I guess I kind of wonder why we're focused. I mean, nonprofits need money as well as anybody else, but we are talking about assisting businesses. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe we shouldn't save out some of this money for months like January, February, March, when we really know what the tourist numbers are and which businesses really start needing to keep going, maybe need a little stipend to keep going. And then we have that money that we could do another grant for local businesses.
I think that's a good point, Nancy, but I think it to what Sam had brought up is that I think we need to have the discussion if there is a budget surplus.
Oh,
So
yeah,
let's
absolutely.
start to look at how it can be allocated.
Yeah, I agree. But I just don't want us to keep thinking nonprofit and forgetting that we're also talking about keeping our businesses going.
Yes, and then also one of the items yet to be discussed is, the possibility of adding money to, I guess it would be advertising for the chamber. If I haven't misspoken that, Bruce.
No, we can provide the chamber with additional funding for advertising, but the projection for them is going to be higher than what we projected based on what we're seeing right now. So there will be additional money going to the chamber, but that doesn't preclude us from doing something and saying, here, this is special to make this happen.
And I do think that's completely separate from what you've sort of mentioned, Nancy, but I do see that as a way to directly help businesses.
Yeah, I just don't want us to just say nonprofits.
No, I
have to say nonprofits and businesses.
And the reason this is on there is that it did come up in the discussion about nonprofits, being in a similar situation. So we didn't cut it off at that point, so I kept it in here.
Okay, the window coverings for storefronts. Any other comments on that one?
I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
I guess the only thing I'm going to ask right now is functionally, how are we going to ask Jim to approach some landlords, or do we want to approach? I mean, somebody's got to do this. It's not really a chamber project. We could send a letter maybe to the properties that we know are vacant.
How many are we talking about?
Can't be that many.
Isn't there 4 now?
As of now, yeah, I think 4.
Yeah, there's
Two of them are the same owner, so it's not a huge
yeah.
endeavor. It's just making that connection and having that conversation. So
Mhm. And then having the conversations to, do we go to the group and kind of coordinate that for us? Or do we go through a process where artists submit ideas, and which would probably put us out in the spring? I think that we just kind of move. And so if we are going to do that, then I would suggest that the arts group.
Are you talking about the public arts group or are you talking about the gallery?
Gallery group, I'm sorry, the gallery group.
Okay.
They have things in hand.
Oh, yeah, they're ready, I'm sure.
I would think that if we just made a statement that this would be beneficial to the community and it would be allowed for this time period between now and summer or something like that, or until the facility rents again, and just let the gallery group sort it out.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And, that's.
I guess consensus is we're permitting this, not requiring it.
Yeah.
But
I'm not,
it started because we don't want a bunch of ugly, empty, vacant buildings. And we're hopeful that somebody will step forward and make them look nice, but what if they don't? They don't want to have their art hanging in an empty store.
Sure.
Unattended, maybe it's heated, maybe it's not. I mean, I think we need to think a little bit beyond just, oh, hey guys, if you want to do it, fine.
Well, I think the landlord too has to approve it, doesn't it?
Right.
Landlord.
Well, again, I probably starting with the landlord, encouraging some form of, not look so empty. Some of them may not want to do the art. They may want to put in some I don't know what they might want to do, but I don't think we would like to see it done so it doesn't look so bad to the town. But I don't think we're in a position or can go around and require it without going through a bunch of process to do that. But I think Sam's idea of announcing, certainly to those landlords and the gallery group, that this is an idea, and we would just, there got to be the limit on the size of the art, the signs, and that the DRB still takes a look at it, I would think. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think if the city is going to do it, then I would approach the landlords, there's 3. And if any of them said yes, approach the gallery group and say, this opportunity is here, here's a phone number. And then it would be done.
Yeah.
And Jeff, I don't think there's anything that would preclude this from happening anyway, right now, correct? Other than the advertising.
Right, if it's not, if it doesn't have like logos or advertising, then I think it's fine.
What if the Adams Gallery was to sponsor 3 windows or something? Could there be a little thing showing, art from the Adams Gallery?
I don't think there's anything explicit about it. It doesn't really has to do with outdoor merchandising because quite frankly, Window signage is not part of outdoor merchandising, so I don't think there's anything. I think we just have kind of kept it, under DRB when we can. And
Yeah.
I think if we set some parameters and say, a certain size or less, and we just stick with that, is almost like we're doing with the other emergency provisions. If we keep a standard, I can run it by the DRB, at the next meeting, and they'll probably, they'd probably agree to that. And so,
Now, if it's inside the space, does DRB?
not normally, no.
Yeah, because I think
There's a limit on how big the signs can be as far as a paper sign that put on the window.
right, but
But
that's not what we're doing.
no, I don't think that would happen.
Yeah.
I think a little comment that, if it was in the Maggie and Henry space and Jeff Hall put a bunch of his pictures in there and said Jeff Hall Gallery upstairs, that's going to pass no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay, so we'll take that on and then just gallery group.
That's commonly done in other places.
Yeah,
And then if somebody didn't want to do an actual artist and they just wanted to put up photography from Haystack Rock, stuff like that, again, there's nothing that would
right.
restrict them from doing that already.
Yeah.
All we're doing is really asking them to consider doing it now because it is it's not an eyesore, but it would be much nicer.
Putting them together.
Okay.
It's up to them.
Well, one thing that you frequently see when this happens is that butcher paper gets put up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fine if somebody's actually working on the space, they kind of need to do that. But if you see that over 3 or 4 stores that are close together, it does
It does.
have an impact.
Okay, all right, we'll follow up on that.
Okay. Comments on the TAC fund support. We kind of talked about that with the other one, but TAC fund is an automatic. So if it's getting funds, all we need to know is how much it's getting. Essentially. The only thing I'm curious about because there could be a lot of funding decision concerns, would this be a possible time to call the budget committee? Because we had talked about having a midterm budget discussion just to keep them apprised of what was going on. I don't know if this would be an opportunity to do that. I don't want to add another meeting to your list because that was a heck of a list, but just an idea. I'll throw it out there.
No, I think that I'm not crazy about additional meetings either, but I think that the nature of the concept of the budget committee is that as conditions change, we get their input on what's happening. And so Sam, as fast as things are changing, I think that's probably a good idea.
You skipped the takeout options, or is it already
Well,
decided
that's
that'd be a
listed twice, so I
chamber?
was going to do that at the end
Oh,
because that's all chamber stuff.
I'm sorry, my notes, I scribbled my notes over that one, so I didn't see it. Sorry. Yeah, that's the menu book with takeout options. Jim, is that something that you guys can coordinate?
Yeah, we can do that. We've done it in the past and there's been other times that that's happened as well. The difficulty in that is coordinating, we're on a list of who's doing takeout, who's open, who has dine-in. We're already doing a lot of that work. It's just incorporating the menus into that.
Yeah.
And how that functions will be the difficult part, and making sure that we get that and keep it updated oftentimes is the hard part. Because when we've done menu books in the past, we get the menu as it is now, but then sometimes those change and we don't get the updated one, so then it kind of becomes outdated. So that's the question and the difficulty of doing a menu book.
you really,
It'll be sorted out and figured out.
you really need a menu.
Restaurants and organize that.
You really need a menu or merely a book that shows location, type of cuisine, some photos of samples, the website, the order phone number, where you'd pick it up and where you can eat it if we did pick up and a tent for eating. And rather than, well, except the restaurants and chamber thinks you can keep current on the menu, that's fine, but I think it's
I don't think you
difficult.
can. I mean, you're doing a good job on your website, keeping track of who's open and who's doing takeout and so forth.
And I think a good part of the idea of this is to get it into rooms
Mhm.
and into visitors' hands at houses to entice them to use our local restaurants rather than bringing in something from Portland or going shopping and doing it all in their room for themselves. If we can get them to work and visit our restaurants and support our community, then that's going to help. And that's, if we can get it in their hands or get it somewhere where they're going to see it when they're here, then we're going to be encouraging them to support our local economy rather than just bringing it in.
So do you see something hardbound then, some kind of a little pamphlet or brochure or?
That I think will take some coordination and figuring out how to do it. Because certainly we could do a nice big binder that has everybody's menus. I've seen options like that. We're just gonna do kind of the highlights. We could do a little handout flyer kind of a deal. So it really is just a matter of coordinating it and figuring out what the restaurants want to support and what we can create and the easiest way to create that so it's useful. So I think there's a lot of coordination that can go into that. And reaching out to the restaurants themselves and getting their input, I think will be a big part of that.
Okay. Yeah. Now the tech funds, any other comments on the tech funds? No? Okay, the relief of the 14-day restrictions for STRs. Any comments on that?
Probably no surprise. I have a lot of comments. You know, one thing that struck me when we did or when the chamber did the survey, we received 8 responses. And some of those were opposing suggestions, but I was kind of disappointed in that. That's all. And then here we are all trying to figure out how to solve a problem and yet 8 responses, but that's neither here nor there. It's one of the responses is what I object to. The governor's emergency declaration and the Oregon Health Agencies for COVID-19 restrictions really had the greatest impact on restaurants, meeting venues and retail shops, but certainly the restaurants, but not on lodging. There's been no data presented that would justify amending the short-term rental ordinance. We have a committee to gather data and make that analysis. It's not for this immediate period, but nobody provided information or data to them, and I haven't seen any of it. What is absent a declared emergency that restricts short-term rentals beyond what the Cannon Beach ordinance provides, any change would be required to go through the full process for amending ordinances, including public hearings, because the declared emergency does not restrict lodging. So this whole idea is we're doing this on an emergency basis. Also question the claim that more frequent short-term rentals would directly benefit restaurants. It's been pointed out that you get larger groups, large families can stay at short-term rentals because hotels are too expensive. Then I believe they would cook and eat in for the same reason. That would benefit the grocery stores, but they don't appear to be seriously negatively impacted. Matter of fact, some anecdotal evidence says they're doing quite well. Encouraging more frequent short-term guests would negatively impact residential neighborhoods that the current short-term rental ordinance is designed to protect, which is counter to what we've spent a number of hearings establishing. And there's no evidence presented that this is an emergency for the short-term rental property owners or managers. Cannon Beach, one of the things that came out was Cannon Beach is a safe place. I think this is a terrible idea. Certainly not a good idea. We encourage even more visitors from outside to come more frequently. We may lose our safe place. However, aggressively promoting our excellent restaurants would likely benefit them more than increasing the short-term rental capacity. So I fully support more promotion of the restaurants, the things we've talked about, but releasing and the restrictions on short-term rentals will not provide the benefit to the restaurants that we would like to see. There are better ways to do that. So that's my view.
Anybody else?
Well, I certainly think there would be some benefit to the restaurants. I mean, the information that was presented to us is that guests that stay in rentals spend 7 times more money in town. I can't say for certain where they spend it, as you pointed out, Mike, but I certainly think restaurants would be part of it. Now, it's certainly possible that you could stay in a house and cook every single meal in there. That is true, but I think for the most part, the people that come and stay here to definitely go out to eat at some point during their stay.
The current ordinance doesn't prevent people coming here and staying in houses and eating in restaurants.
No, of course not.
And to just allow more short-term, come in for the weekend or come in for a couple of days is doing just exactly what we're trying to prevent. And that is having, I call it an invasion of outsiders coming into our residential neighborhoods. More in and out, more check-ins, more check-outs. And twice I've heard the management company saying they don't have the staff to do this, certainly not in the winter. So I think there are many better ways to encourage people to come to our restaurants. I think we have some excellent restaurants. We should promote those. I hate to say it, but the day trippers might be a better benefit for the restaurants than somebody coming with their family. And I'm basing it on some experience. Our family comes, everybody gets together, they go to the store. Everybody comes in and cooks and they eat there. They don't go to the restaurants. It is too darn expensive to take a family out to the restaurants. You might do it once, but having more often and more frequent and more check-ins and check-outs, and say we're doing that to benefit the restaurants. What we're doing is benefiting, maybe not benefiting anybody. It's wintertime. Show me the evidence. Show me how this is going to really make a difference. So,
Mike, could you repeat to me what you said about changing the ordinance? Because that's the thing that rang clear to me, is that it might create a process.
yeah, well, we're doing these changes and it's helping the businesses. When we gave the grants out, when the businesses were literally shut down and we had grants, we were doing all that under the provision of an emergency declaration by the governor. Some of the restrictions are by the health authority, and then the city itself declared emergency and said no lodging, no visitors. That seemed appropriate. And that was an emergency. We provided funds for that. Right now, there are no restrictions on lodging. The city's not imposed any restrictions on lodging. The state hasn't imposed any. And we're just going into winter. So to change an ordinance without this declaration of an emergency, I think, says we have to go through the normal process for an ordinance amendment.
If I can, Mike, I think we do have the declaration of emergency that's there. And one of the elements of that allowed staff to look at situations like this and determine whether or not we should waive certain things. For example, allowing dining in parking lots, that kind of thing. And my only point there is that I think that if the council wanted to do it, I think that mechanism is there. Just based on the emergency declaration and what you previously said. Whether we do it or not is totally up to you, but I don't believe, and we can check with Ashley as to whether or not we would actually have to go through an ordinance change in order to make that happen, which that's probably a 2 or 3 month process once we get started.
Well, I'll stay here all night. If the city had imposed, or the state, a restriction harmed the lodging industry and they're losing revenues, I see calling that an emergency, we help them. We're doing that for the hotels or the restaurants. They're required to maintain large spacing and smaller groups. And I'm not sure about the shorter hours here because we have short hours anyway, early closing times. But there are statewide restrictions and it's creating harm for those restaurants. We can promote and advertise, come to the restaurants. That's a help. But say, why don't we hand out coupons to all the residents? Say, hey, go to the restaurants. And in essence, you're saying if I own a short-term rental, you're going to give me the opportunity to collect some revenue. And maybe those people would go to the restaurant, maybe they won't. It's not a direct, it's a very indirect approach to improve, hopefully without any data, without any evidence, that you're going to benefit the restaurants by altering ordinances that have been duly authorized through the process to address a specific need or concern, and that was the impact of short-term rentals in the neighborhoods. And now just to say, oh, there's an emergency, and we hope if we just let people come anytime that they might go to the restaurant and that might help a restaurant. I'd rather see something more direct of even providing like the coupon idea. There's money that helps the restaurant by inviting people to come to the restaurant to spend their money rather than going to a house and buying groceries and cooking in. Maybe a couple of times they'll go to a restaurant. It's not like we're full. I don't know how many more people we'd get, but I think we're really violating and getting really loose with the idea of what we can do under an emergency. You know, there may be other things. Oh, well, under an emergency, we can do this, we can do that, we can do something else because we are under a state of emergency without a directly addressing the businesses that are being hurt by the COVID regulations. I don't see how you can say you're going to change ordinances or bypass ordinances to maybe help somebody in the restaurant business. You're going to do that. I mean, if you help me, I might go spend the money in a restaurant.
The one aspect of helping the restaurants by having greater turnover in the short-term rentals is the fact that the restaurant dinner is more valuable to them than a lunch, and only overnight stays have dinner. You don't have short day trippers that much. Stick around in the winter, have dinner at a nice restaurant, and then drive back to Portland. So I think the idea of supporting the restaurants, to me, is valid. Your concerns about being obviously going over the bounds of a restriction that we have just because it's an emergency. If that's the only tool we can find to help the restaurants get their dinner services, even if it is a once per visit situation, by opening up the short-term rentals, you get twice as many options there for the restaurant. So even if they only get one meal during their stay. So there are
assuming twice as many people are coming by removing that restriction. There's no evidence to that.
Well, no, there's no evidence, but there's never going to be an evidence unless we try it. My sense is if you say from now until spring break, I wouldn't go till May, I would go to spring break. But that's 4 months, 5 months. During a winter, would that really be difficult? Actually, it would also have a secondary limitation that should the emergency declaration be rescinded, that would automatically stop it because that's been an emergency declaration.
The people that live next door to a nightly rental, people live next door to a nightly rental breathe a sigh of relief when summer's over. And now we're saying, oh, restaurants need help, so we're going to allow you to continue to have summer visitors all year round.
Well,
Anyway, nobody else agrees with me, but I hear too many complaints from people that are just saying, oh God, they finally left.
Jim, what do you hear from short-term rental operators about this particular idea? Or have you heard anything?
There's a few different things I would say that would address that. One, the 14-day rental leaves that space open for a week by allowing a shorter than 14-day, and no one's saying that it's going to go overnight every night, because the short-term rentals don't function that way. They prefer not to have it. They want longer stays as much as they can. During the winter time, they run into the situation where they rent it 1 week or one weekend, depending on the thing, and then it sits empty on either side for the 2 weeks. So that makes it very difficult. If we shorten that and allow those spaces to fill in, it's not going to be this constant turnover. It's just going to allow to fill in those gaps that are open. And if we get one family that comes in to one of those weeks that would have to sit empty because of the 14-day license, they bring their family in for that weekend, they stay here, they go out to eat once, that helps our community. That's the way the hospitality industry works. We get the people here and they support the businesses, which is what I believe we're trying to do tonight. Then that helps. If just one family comes down and does one thing, that helps.
But
When those opportunities available, then we can multiply that. If you want to see stats on what an overnight stay is versus a day tripper, I can give those to you from Dean Runyon, who's been doing it for our state.
No, I'm very familiar with those numbers. What I haven't seen is the demand for the nightly rentals, the fact that we don't have the vacancies. My concern is, you gave an example, they come in for a weekend and now you can't rent it for a week. What if somebody else comes in the next day and somebody else the next day? Now you're gonna rent it 5 or 6 times in the month instead of twice.
Then if that's
I think that's the
possible, then those
proposal.
extra 4
Sure, it's possible.
vacation renters would be supporting our community.
Yeah, but
Helping our
I'm here to represent and try to support our community. So I just haven't seen it. It's all hypothetical right now. We don't know how many will show up. Maybe nobody will.
If nobody shows up, then we haven't done any harm to.
No, that's right.
They,
Yeah, they don't show up, but if they do and say, oh man, what a deal. And it's just like summer again.
What is exactly the proposal for it is in terms of how often they would be rented? Because it says relief of the 14-day restriction for STRs to allow the unrented weekends to be filled. So how many times a month are we talking about in terms of rental for
honestly, I
STRs?
think that's your decision to make.
Our
We're just
decision.
Asking for relief from the 14 days, from what I understand, to make it a shorter time frame. If it was 7 days,
Just
then
7.
that would open up a few weekends throughout the holidays.
So it wouldn't be every weekend in the month, no.
I would be surprised if it was that busy, but
Good.
you never know. And the perfect example of this is the holiday season. If somebody rents a room for Christmas, they have their weekend or week or however long they stay, and that takes up that time period, then New Year's, because it's less than a week later, remains empty, which is a prime example of when, so if one of those holiday weekends is taken, the other one has to remain empty because of the 14-day restriction. If that was lessened to 7, then you could book both of those weekends, which are prime weekends, and it would be available.
Jim, I actually proposed a plan that would do just that. And was told, oh, we'd have to change our whole reservation system. If you just allowed twice a month, they could do that. Christmas, New Year's, that was an example we used. And they've been nearly unanimous by the operators, managers, that they're all set up the way they are now. They don't want to change it. And they did not want to go to every, or 2 times a month. They wanted to stay with a 14-day limit, just like it is now. That's what they asked to do. I couldn't understand why they'd want to do it that way, but that's what they wanted.
It's a matter of weeks, Mike. If you go from every 2 weeks to twice a month, you're losing 2 rentals throughout the year. So it's just a matter of numbers, basically.
Well,
the way I see it.
yeah,
So
it assumes you're,
actually cutting down what they can rent, so I'm in favor of that. And yeah, they would have to change over their whole system because they designed and set up their systems to meet the ordinances that the city has put in place.
but now you're wanting them to let them redesign their system for a short-term period instead of for a long time. You're saying just do it for a few months. They couldn't do it before. Now they're willing to do it for a couple of months.
Changing from 14 days to 7 days or whatever number you guys decided on, I think would be much easier than trying to switch to a certain amount in a month. So,
Because I was the one who kind of put this list together, so I don't know if I created a false impression. When we were having the discussion, I think this is you and me, Jim, and I think we had some people on the phone. This was not suggested by anybody in the short-term rentals. It was suggested by people that were talking about ways to help the retail and the restaurants. So this wasn't requested. This was just, how can we get more people in? And so the discussion that we're having is, are there ways that we can help? And no, we can't guarantee that we can help. This is a way that I think intuitively all know there will be probably more than there would be if we stay with the current system. Is it worth it to do that versus the offset, which, you know, Mike is so eloquently put forth? So I just want to clarify, nobody from the short-term rentals requested this. This was people saying, let's help, maybe we can do this to get more foot traffic. And there's,
We did visit this fall. And we did decide that we would keep the 14-day in place, correct?
yes,
And that's why the vacation rentals didn't really chime in that much, because they knew you guys have already made the decision. But I
Okay.
would point out and remind you that it was this council's decision to close the hotels and the vacation rentals when COVID hit. So there was a direct impact at that time, which were passed, but it did happen. And so they were affected.
And we granted funds for that and gave them waivers on when their taxes are due.
Like Bruce says, the whole idea for this is overnight stays. Overnight stays help the restaurants. We don't want to talk about this anymore, that's fine. But this was one tool in the bucket that we might be able to use. I've always been agreeable to this as long as it was a limited time span. So other than that, I don't really have arguments in favor or against, other than the fact that I believe it would help the increase or maintain a number of overnight stays in town through the winter for the restaurants. So that's all. Can we move on, or do we have more points that we want to make on this? Okay, we'll move on, and we can always come back to it later if you want. Let's move on to the next one, which is provide designated takeaway parking spaces. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't see really how much that's going to help. Just because from what I've noticed of the takeaway stuff downtown, you still have to stand around and wait.
That was my concern too, is Driftwood has done such a beautiful job of doing takeaway, but still you'll order something for a specific time and you may still have to wait 10 minutes to get it. So I don't know. I'd like to see the restaurant say this is a good idea for them.
I don't have any problem with opening it up for maybe those that don't have their own parking space. You know, like Driftwood has an ability to park their own.
Yeah.
I guess my first idea would be the one next to me, the Mexican place. They don't have any parking, so maybe that would be beneficial for them, but they're not doing a takeout. So there you go. They might change, I don't know. When they get the other spot going, maybe that would really help them. So maybe on a case-by-case situation, I would agree to this. I just don't see it as much help for the loss of a parking space unless we go with Jim's idea and use the 10-minute spaces that we already have. That might work.
If you did that and put a sign there that said reserved for takeout orders only, that's probably sufficient.
thing is, right now it currently says loading, unloading. So we would lose that opportunity. So, and that's why I was thinking that if we were going to do this, I wouldn't use the green zones. I would put something, because right now somebody could park in the green zone and go in and bring their stuff out. But this is not an advertisement, but I have bought pizza at Angelina's. And you tell them what kind of car you're driving, and when you pull up, they know it's you, and they go out and they bring it right to your car, and they take care of it that way. So I think that putting it right in front of the store, in addition to the
Makes more sense.
good, but the green zones are used for loading.
Right.
So I don't want to confuse the two.
I think it's also, like I said, case by case, because certain restaurants have that ability to have a door right there. McGregor's is a great, they could do that, would work very well. And it's a space right in front of their door.
Yeah.
Sure, that could work.
I think that's what it would take, because if it's a dedicated space and it's a block away, it really doesn't help that much. So I would think that it would have to be something that'd be easy I know what Sam is driving, I go ahead and I bring it right out to him. You're gone, the order's gone. We've got our money. So I think that we would need to tailor it more along those lines if we were to do it.
Yeah.
The other side of it is that you got a space that is not going to be used most of the time. Unless you say, takeout only from these hours to these hours or something.
Yeah, the green zones could have that opportunity after hours because most of them are time sensitive for the loading and unloading. So for suppers, that might work really well. So other than that, I don't have any issues with this one.
Just I think we'd be receptive to any restaurant that came and said, I'd like to do this. Help me find a way to do it.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, that would be a good way to do it. To let them know that we'd be, if they want to, come talk to us.
I think what would help with that is if there was some understanding from you guys on what that process is. I'm just saying, come talk to us. If they have time to get away from their business, they can, but if you said we're willing to allow that spot designated for pickup and delivery. Here's an application or here's the guidelines for that. Then I think more businesses or restaurants would be inclined to say, oh, that will work for us, and then come and talk to you about it. So some sort of clarification on that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think the guidelines idea is a good idea.
Well, the way that we didn't really have rules for the dining in parking lots. It was just conceptually, you guys said it could happen. Jeff went out, he met with each one of them, said, looked at it in a reasonable way and said, well, we don't like if you do that, but you can do this and you can get approved. So I think it would be a similar thing, not to go through, create very much of a bureaucracy, just that we will try to accommodate restaurants to give them a designated parking space for takeout and let them come to the city. Again, Jeff has been handling all this in a really, very good job. And Karen would work with him as far as from the science standpoint if it was to occur.
It's probably, each one's a little bit unique. It's not going to be a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah. But I agree with Jim. I mean, somebody's got to fill out a thing and then figure out, well, which space do I want and what do I, it's just Jeff, yes, no, whatever, Karen. So if you want to do it, I think that we can keep it that simple.
I'm good with that one.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's a yes?
Yeah, let's try and offer that one. Where am I? Next idea, tents to improve outdoor seating. Some of the concepts that I did a little research on this, and I found some high wind tents that are for events. Man, they're expensive. They are really, but they're meant to. The challenge that I saw in most of them is they're very enclosed because they don't want wind catching in underneath them. So they kind of negate the idea of outdoor seating. So I was having some challenges with that one. I still like the idea of potentially using Second Street for something. The little canopies that we have are fine for moderate weather, but as soon as it gets anywhere horizontal, they're not worth it. Unless you have walls on them and then you wind up having a whole canopy just for one family or one table, which is helpful, I guess, but it's still.
The reason for this suggestion is that we recognize the cost of the rentals or the purchase. And so it's like, well, we have some if we're willing to let those, be used. But clearly it's not leave them up every night and they blow away like the last time did. Everybody, they were just there. We had a big wind. We knew the big wind was coming and tore them up.
Even the driftwood, those guys went out and tried to secure. Nobody knew what that wind was going to do.
Yeah.
So they secured things, just what they thought, what I would have thought would have been okay. a bigger tent would have just got tangled up in a bigger mess. So I don't, and we know those storms are still coming. This couple days from now might have an east wind that's the same. If we were to come up with some, a sheltering idea that might have more durability, I could see that. I've got an idea for that one. It's not a tent, it would be a structure, but it would be an open-sided structure that could fit within a parking space kind of thing. That's an idea that I've been batting around. But the tents themselves would have to be more like an event. So, and I don't mind trying that just because we've got the event thing coming up. We're discussing that, trying one out, seeing how it works.
Yeah, I liked the idea originally. As a matter of fact, I think it might have been proposed, but they are expensive. I did look into that. They're really, really expensive. And I'd hate to do that and then have it sit there empty most of the time. Or find that it wasn't convenient for somebody to take their takeout meal and go down the street and get back in the car and go back to their home or their hotel. So if it concerned me to spend a lot of money doing that and have this big white elephant sitting there being embarrassed by it.
Well, and the additional, because cleaning of each table every
Oh, yeah,
time.
I mean, the operations.
And making sure that people are being socially distanced. And I mean, you would have to have a monitor and a cleaner there to make sure that it's being
If it was empty
operated.
or not, you're gonna have that.
What's
Yeah.
If
that?
it was empty or not, we need.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also, I mean, the city, if the city was the one that said, okay, we'll take care of that, we take on that liability.
Did we have a time limit on the canopies? We authorized that?
No, but it was beginning of summer.
Okay,
And we saw that as kind of self limiting.
yeah.
That once the weather changed and they weren't, enough. But I think we had a little bit of a surprise wind and kind of made the decision for us.
But we wouldn't object if somebody still wanted to try it. I mean, they've got a week of nice weather coming and they've had the canopies, they use them. The storms are coming, they take them back down. I wouldn't have a problem with continuing to use those.
Yeah.
Certainly.
What about the sided ones? Would you be opposed to allowing them to be sided on?
I would think if you made some sort of statement like two sides or 50% covered, most of our weather comes from one direction at a time. So it would be possible, even with a 10 by 10 canopy, to cover two sides, still have good ventilation for a larger tent. That would be very acceptable as far as I'm concerned.
Would you be limiting one party to that
Well,
tent?
if you had a larger tent, say you had a tent big enough to cover the space that Driftwood has just to the north of their building. So
See,
that's-
I'm thinking my comfort level is that you would have one party in a space like the tents that
Canopies.
canopy.
the canopies that we have. Because then you'd be not exposing people to other people.
Yeah, and that the whole idea would be, being outside and the proper distancing. So yes, the canopies would work really well, but then you'd have all these little canopies all over the place.
Right.
So I guess that's the difference between one big tent, which would have the same distancing, same air ventilation.
Would it be the same as what a restaurant would be allowed to do normally, which is,
25 or whatever the percent is, but you're right. Bigger doesn't help us
right,
because there's a limit in how many people you can get. And if you can social distance in one that's 20 by 20, that's fine. 40 by 40 doesn't get you any more people.
right.
So that's what we would have to look at.
Regardless of whether it had sides on it?
I think, I don't know that. I think that if it doesn't have sides, it might be just I don't know the difference between having a roof. I've never seen anything that said if you're outdoors, and you have a roof of some kind, that you get such and such. It's either you're indoor or outdoor. So we might have to get a clarification on that.
Clearly, to make it worthwhile to, either stand up all the time and last through the season, it's going to have some kind of an enclosure.
Right.
Like Sam said, on possibly two sides.
I think at that point, we have a room
Yeah,
and then it's 25,
And then you've got to heat it too.
possibly.
I don't know what that would entail.
I think that would be self-regulating because as a customer, you would want to sit outside in the cold. So why have a tent if nobody's going to sit outside?
Mhm.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about with, if you have 4 or 5 10 by 10 canopies, the poor wait staff has to put on their sou'westers to go from one to the other. Whereas if you have a larger facility, tented space, that's going to have 4 or 5 tables in it, at 4 people, that's 25. So that would be more comfortable than for the wait staff.
Make a suggestion. We had one person mention this. I think it was a good idea. If you folks are amenable to the concept, what if we just leave it that the chamber can go ahead and check with people and they can come to us or put together something that they think might work. And then we're not dealing with so many what ifs. I think that I would think that, and if we want that to happen, the city's got to say that we would be willing to chip in something. Otherwise, I don't give it a high probability of happening.
Are we talking about covering a space? Is that what you're talking about right now?
Because I don't know what we're talking about, is why I'm making this suggestion.
Okay.
Wait for people come to us and say, what if, could we work with you and try to do this? Because right now, I don't know if anybody's gonna bite on this, say they'll participate or whatever, and I don't know what the costs are. So I think if we, and I don't know if we are, but if you all are amenable to even considering it, let people come to us and say that we'd like to do this and we'd like this much from the city to make that happen, and we'll take care of the rest.
And then you would come back to us.
Well, I'd like to point this out. This just came out today, and it's Palm Springs to reopen Palm Canyon Drive to cars after lawsuit about outdoor dining. So a lot of the rest are businesses around made this complaint because they didn't feel that they were getting equal treatment. I'll send it to Jen so she can send it to all of us, but it is a situation that it just happened in Palm Springs, and the lawsuit made the city not close a street down.
But we're not, are we still talking about closing a street down?
Well, that's what I was asking about when,
But I understand what Robin's saying is if we give priority to certain businesses because they happen to be on the main street, and there are other businesses not on the main street that don't get that same application, they have a chance. They should complain. That's what these folks are doing.
Even the tent create that same problem. So that works great for the people like McGregor's right on Second Street. It's real close and go right out. But I'm 2 blocks away. It's not helping me. So
Well, and the
put a
same
tent
thing,
down here.
and the same thing happens if we allow it for somebody like Driftwood who has a nice parking space. McGregor's doesn't have a parking space.
Right.
So now what do we allow them to do? Do we give them some of the parking space in the right of way? Maybe that would be an option. So I agree with Bruce. I think it would be better almost for us to say what we absolutely don't want so that he has a clue on that. My sense on that is any four-sided tent negates the reason for having outdoor dining. So I think two sides gives you a chance. And if they're willing to put up some sort of tenting, whether it's small 10 by 10s or a 20 by 30, bring that request to us and let staff see if it fits. And if they still are unsure, bring it to council and we'll make a decision on it.
If I can ask for a little bit of a clarification. I would think that if somebody like Driftwood wanted to do a tent in their parking lot, that's something that staff is already able to deal with because we did it with canopies or whatever. I think that, so like if somebody said, I want to put a tent in my parking lot, I would say, come talk to us. So we got a lot of issues to talk about, but that's not one we would necessarily fund. The one that I think is possible that we would fund is if we closed, say, Second, and there was enough interest that other people are willing to kick in, make it meaningful. I think that it's a little bit more centralized as far as people could walk to it if you're just trying to find a place to eat. But I don't see us getting into saying that we will rent you a tent for the winter, for a particular business. I think that if it's going to serve several. And also I think that, well, and this kind of goes to Robin's point, is that if all of a sudden it starts raining, we're not going to be able to control how many people are in there. That's the only place to get out of the rain. So, and then we have to accept that somebody, either the people that approach us or the city, is going to have the responsibility for the cleanup and for COVID type cleanup.
The only other idea that I would offer would be, rather than one large public tent, would be to establish several small little shelters throughout town that are public, that people have a chance to use. So if they got takeout from one restaurant, they could go to the little public shelter, picnic table, covered, and use that. And then the city would cover those and they would be in the public right away, either on Second Street or some other location.
Makes it even tougher on the COVID cleanup.
The cleanup issue is
Cleanup issue.
still the challenge.
Yeah.
But do we clean up the picnic tables at City Park right now?
I'm sorry?
Do we clean up the picnic tables at City Park?
No.
They're used all the time. So I guess that becomes, are we providing picnic tables for public use? Are we responsible now to clean up every picnic table in town? I don't know. That's a question I don't know.
Good one.
So yeah.
Thanks,
do some
Sam.
research on that.
No, that's a good question.
See, I don't feel, I think that because there's enough time in between, and how long, I understand COVID may or may not live on wood, but that there's time in between those. But with a situation that we're doing it at dinner or lunch, that's just going to constantly turn those tables. So I would be more concerned in that case. But I don't have an answer for you, Sam, as far as what the responsibilities are.
Well, I would say the perception is that if you provide a space that's clearly for takeout dining, that it's like a restaurant type thing, and that, yes, we're responsible for cleaning that. A park bench somewhere, I think anybody that goes to a park can reasonably assume there's nobody coming to clean that. And if you want it clean, you better clean it yourself.
Or bring a tablecloth.
Exactly. I think there is quite a difference between the two.
Yeah. So leaving it for people to bring proposals.
Yeah, I think that's,
See if there's
see
kind
what
of,
kind of interest there is.
Yeah.
We might be blowing in the wind here.
yeah, somebody may have a magic bullet, so. Okay, Jim, can you kind of put that out there that if anybody's got anything they want to propose, bring it in.
I would add one thing. If a lot of these are going to be proposals that come to the city for ideas and individual thoughts from different businesses on how they could do, what they could do to help themselves or help their businesses. there's going to be a need to expedite that on your guys' end. Review those quickly and get an answer back to them, because like we had to go through the whole design review board and the process that takes months. If we're going to find solutions that can help now, then we need to get those answers back as quickly as possible.
I think that, Jeff, you handled most of these with a site visit, didn't you? The ones that we've done?
Oh, yeah, well, for all the emergency ones.
Right, and I would think that this would kind of be handled under the same thing, because we're still dining kind of thing. For, in parking lot. So, I think that in most cases, it would be a relatively simple process. If it was something that was more permanent, I know that some people have talked about trying to build like a permanent structure over their garage or over their parking lot. That's got all kind of ramifications, because it's required parking, there's, structural issues. So that one is not going to be simple. But the same person that had suggested that, if they want to do a tent, we'll go and talk about what it is they want to do.
But I think even in that situation, if it can be expedited in any way to help move that along quicker would be helpful, even if it is a longer drawn out project.
Yeah. Well, longer drawn out, the process, it is.
I know it's established.
See, but the thing, one thing that's happened is people have talked about that process, but nobody submitted. So, there's nothing, had somebody submitted 2 months ago, it would be quite a ways down the line. So I'm not sure that we are the ones that are holding up as far as process. But I think
the process does take time, and realizing that it takes time. Most of the businesses do, so they're going to do a larger project. It's going to take time, but it's more difficult for them to make the effort and the time to draw that plans up, because it's not going to support what they need now. So if there was a way to speed that process, I think that you might get more applications through that process. I'm not saying you need to change the process, but if there was some way that they felt like it would be expedited to help, then I think that might encourage people to be more forthcoming with their ideas.
I think all three, we're talking about two separate things. If it's the tentage and coverings that are very temporarily placed and might be removed for foul weather, I don't see any problem with staff running that and saying, yeah, let's do it, because it's pretty much already allowed. All we're doing is adding maybe some walls to the tent. The more permanent structures, that's the process that we have established. And personally, I would not want any more permanent projects to be in place. Or to be, that's not something I think is going to be beneficial. If it was a more permanent structure, say somebody brought in like a construction trailer and wanted to use that, as long as they knew that as soon as we said time for that thing to go, it had to be gone within a day or two, that's what a construction trailer can do. But anything that's got a hardened foundation is going to get stuck for a while.
And I'm not sure if somebody running a construction trailer, if it would be an easy run through staff. Assuming there's an awful lot of issues, but again, somebody is just saying, I just want to put a hardened roof over what I've got. Especially if it's it's going to take some time. It's going to have to go through planning and zoning, because you've got required parking, and are you waiving that? And there's all kinds of other issues with it. So, Jim, I think if somebody got the process started, we could look at trying to see how quickly we could get it through. But I don't think, a presumption that, go talk to Jeff and we'll be able to get a garage put in our parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask kind of a off the cuff question? Businesses pay the city a certain amount for parking. I know that the kite shop had 5 parking spots that they paid for. As we're taking parking spots away, how do the people feel that are paying for those spots about what we're doing there? That's a question.
Are they paying for them on the street?
And they're like
In the parking lot?
virtual parking spots because they're not allocated.
Yes.
Okay, Jeff?
You couldn't have said it better,
I
Rob.
like virtual. We think they're virtual too.
They are virtual.
There's an idea of a parking.
Concepts.
If you get there early enough.
And how many?
When that was presented, they were paying for the maintenance of the parking at city parking lot. You're paying for a portion of the maintenance. That was the way it was originally sold.
But it's a certain number of spaces
Yeah, it
that
was
each,
calculated by space.
yeah. So.
And not every business does that.
If the kite shop is required to have 5 spaces, at one time, they would have had the opportunity to pay the cost of those 5 spaces. I don't think we feel the cost of those spaces was covering our costs. And
But it continues to be charged to people who doesn't pay for them?
if you
I know restaurants do.
If you have your parking, if you meet the parking requirements, you don't have to do that. And so what happens is that cost is supposed to be for the parking lot and those other things that we provide. It goes ahead and covers those costs.
Yeah, and it's still the greatest deal on earth. I mean, even like you said, the kite shop. So that next person, we're kind of grandfathering in those 5 spaces where they had to provide what's there. They couldn't. There's no way on earth it would just become a parking lot. So yeah, we have got to solve that over this coming year, I think. And that's what that transportation study and parking study is going to help us with that, so.
I understand what Robin's asking is if we're reducing the number of parking spaces, should they be compensated or should they, my sense of that is if we're only doing this during the winter, when we don't have full-on parking summer style, it seems moot. But if we did have a full-on summer parking situation in November, which I can't imagine, last weekend was a very busy weekend,
It was.
but there was plenty of parking.
There wasn't until around 3:30. And then there was, but it was pretty busy.
It was busy, but there was, from what I could see on First Street, there was always a parking space. And was able to set up. So anyhow,
I think staff feels that the parking fees that people pay to not have to provide parking is an onion. You really want to think hard before you start peeling.
I just thought I'd bring it up because
No.
I think people think they have these spots in town. And
No, Rob.
if we're limiting them, I worry about that.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right, but you can go ahead and there's a corollary to that and a corollary to that. And so that's why I'm saying that, it's going to be like this, oh my gosh, kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, and you brought up one of the shortcomings.
and I don't know, Jeff, it's not allowed anymore to do that. If you're
Right.
building a new building.
Right.
So this is all.
Then you don't have to do it.
You can't.
Can't,
But you still have to provide parking.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I meant.
which is one of our primary restrictors for new development downtown.
If you buy an existing business that's doing that and don't make any changes to it, do you still pay the parking?
Yeah,
Yep.
that stays.
Unless you provide.
Because that's,
Yes, I understand.
this all started with the building right next to me. It was called the Criterion then.
Yep.
That all started because of her. It was her proposal. In fact, she got on the city council just so she could push that through. Sour grapes. Anyhow. That has sold twice since then. So, yeah. Anyhow, okay.
on the street closures?
The one idea about could be used as a test study. I agree with the fact that it could be a good test study just to see if we could do it. How effective it would work and whether it is comparative to a summer event, I doubt it. That's obvious. But it could be interesting to find out if it could be a good off-season event.
Mhm. And I think that this ends up with a tent.
Yes.
So this, I would say we don't need to spend a whole bunch of time on this unless somebody brings this to us as a proposal. So I don't know if that, we can spend as much time as you want, but because it ends up with the tent and with somebody doing all of the cleanup and stuff.
Yeah.
We may want to wait until we see if that's proposed.
And I don't see it being effective as a long-term solution in the winter. So again, it goes back to our events ordinances. And if it works for an event, on a shoulder season type event, post-COVID, I'm all for it. But right now, COVID just messes it all up.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of saw it too, Sam, was more of a pilot study for an event type of weekend where you could see how these things worked out. Because I agree, like during the week and most of this, 6 months, there's not going to be anybody downtown or even in, one of those, using one of those tents to take out to anyhow, I don't think. So I think it's only going to work on something like that. And, I don't know if Rick would let us borrow, but don't we have the tents for the big, we,
Sided door,
We have the 10 by 10 four-sided.
but don't we have the larger ones, the big one for
The only one we have is the Base X, the MASH tent. And that's really, it's not much bigger inside than two 10 by 10s.
oh, really? So you don't have
It's not huge.
but that's
Fun to put up though.
Every day.
Yeah, that would be a challenge. Oh, okay. And we kind of melded into the permitted covering outdoors, so we kind of covered that. School property parking. I don't see it being necessary myself. Just because if it is a rainy day, who's going to park way over there and then walk down?
Well, and the thing is that right now the food bank uses that Monday through Wednesday. And I think it's kind of wonderful to see kids skating and playing basketball and soccer in that spot where if you had people parking there, that would become an issue of safety. But the kids are really enjoying that spot on a nice day.
School district took the basketball hoops with them, so that's done.
Can pretend.
I've seen skiing. Again, in the winter, right now, that would be more of a summer overflow possibility.
Well, and if we had the school use, like we did with the haystack program. I remember that being used as a parking lot, but there was a purpose that people were going to paint and draw and play music and write.
That's another discussion coming up.
Okay.
Okay, so the last three are the things for Jim to play with. Good ideas. Actually, the passport and coupon book could be combined into a very fun thing.
Ideas have come up at the chamber before.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of bandwidth and funding and whether it will be beneficial or not. So I think we'll be revisiting these and seeing what is doable.
And I'm going to go back to something that Mike said earlier from a totally different argument. the idea of maybe the city helping the restaurants by giving direct coupons to residents
Excuse me.
has a little bit of a merit to it. If we have the funding, then we could do that. We could, maybe in the next water bill or something like that, give a $20 coupon for lunch. If that's a clever idea that it helps the restaurants, okay. Personally, I'd rather have a 10% discount on my water bill. Gone up like crazy.
Yeah, they'll be very suspicious and wonder if we've lost our minds when we do that.
Okay, any other ideas or anything you want to go back on?
Let's kind of walk through, so make sure we're on the same thing. The assistance for nonprofits, and I think there was one other one. We want to pull together the budget committee and talk about what the first quarter held and versus what we had projected, and then decide whether or not we want to try to do anything outside of just putting the money in the bank. The window coverings or artwork, staff will get a hold of the 3 landlords. And then if they express an interest, then we will get a hold of the gallery group and say, here's the phone number, have at it. The tax support, that one is the same, in my mind, is the same as pull together the budget committee and see what we might want to do with that. The relief, the 14-day, there was no decision made up or down. We said yes to the designated takeaway, and that's based on somebody coming and saying, I'd like to use this spot or whatever. We probably need to think whether or not we want to put some time restrictions on that. Maybe it's open until 11:30 and then from 2 to 4 or something. I don't know. We can look at it. The tents to improve the outdoor seating. We talked about farmers market tents. Did not sound like that was something that we were going to offer. Agreed? Okay.
Yes.
All right, street closures. This again goes with the whole tent concept, that if somebody has a proposal for us to consider, then, bring it forward and we'll evaluate it and see if it can be made to work. But in the meantime, we won't pursue closing the street or putting a tent in it until we know that. Until somebody comes and says, this will work for us, and we're really excited. Abbreviated process for permitting coverings for outdoor seating options. We can do what we can. But what happens is that if Sam and Mike and Nancy all have permits in, and then I permit something, I want to do something for in my parking lot that can be something more permanent, to expedite me, you all get pushed back. And we're always kind of hesitant on doing something like that. No, we try to get all of them out as quickly as we can, but that's a fairness issue, a policy issue, that if y'all want to say that particular kind of a function will go to the head of the class, that's fine, but I'm a little hesitant on that. Open the school property for parking in your town? No. Last 3, go to Cambridge. And I said was the assistance for the nonprofits. That was one that we were going to have a meeting of the budget committee before we made a decision about allocating funds. The window coverings, approach the landlords. They say yes, Galaxy or the gallery group. And then TAC fund, same thing with the budget committee. The rest of them, I think you're here for.
And I would really not want to see us pursue a permanent structure, especially over a parking lot at the moment, because our parking situation is so terrible.
And it's going to be hard because those are required spaces, for the business. And I don't know how else you're going to replace those. And if you say, well, never mind, you can just go ahead and use those, we won't worry about it. You got everybody else that's either paying or is restricted from expanding because they don't have parking. But, yeah.
a possible idea, on the November 3rd regular meeting, you noted it doesn't seem to be a very heavy agenda. If we ask Lori to present, time for her to do the.
Yes.
Would it be possible to close that meeting and then open a budget meeting right behind it?
Yes.
Would the council be interested in doing that? If that didn't extend the meetings too much and the budget committee was willing to come in?
Yeah, I like that myself.
Anybody else?
Yeah, would you consider meeting at 5:30 rather than 7?
We could.
There's an executive session before that meeting.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Oh, so we have an executive session, a regular session, and then we would have a budget meeting?
Okay,
Sorry, I just.
that's a challenge. I didn't, it's not on your list.
We can try to do it relatively quickly. I think that's important.
The budget or the,
The budget committee. So we can try to bring folks together. Maybe one evening during the week of the meeting on the 3rd.
is everybody okay with having a second meeting that week?
Well, we might,
It's also election night.
Oh. That.
Yeah.
They're not gonna have any results, so.
Also, real quick, I think we have some applicants for budget. There was one before that we said, let's wait and see if we have some more, and then we have another one that come in.
yeah,
So
on the 3rd if you want.
Okay.
And then maybe try to have the meeting later.
I think so. I think it'd be wise.
Well, because we've got a whole bunch of other ones that we're piling into that same times, those first 2 weeks in November. I was just trying to avoid
Yeah.
another time
We'll
schedule.
probably do what you're talking about, Sam, at the meeting on the 10th. Because that's kind of like an average. So, we could do a budget meeting after or something.
Okay.
Or even if we wanted to, if it would be okay, maybe to meet at 4:30 for the budget committee. It shouldn't take that long, and then we're done, stay late. But that's up to folks who are still working.
That's on the 10th
10th.
to have the budget meeting.
Oh, that'd be okay with me.
Yeah, I think election should be kind of special
Yeah,
for you.
Depends on who wins.
Oh, Nancy, you're gonna win. Don't worry about it.
I want to talk about me. So we're doing a budget meeting on the 10th at 4:00, is that right?
I heard 4:30. Do you guys want to do 4?
4:30 would be better for me.
4:30?
Within-
on the 10th.
And then there's the work session at 5:30, correct?
On the 10th.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Don't want to be here on election night.
Well, we kind of have to be.
We have to or not, but there's not,
We've already scheduled a,
I know, but we can
Executive session.
reschedule.
okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying that because it's kind of a big deal, we really want to spend the middle, the heart of the evening here. Jen, what were the items on it? Can you look that up?
This one was on the 3rd.
Yes.
It's the community grants, the Pacific Power Extension, and the TAP. TAP was going to present their recommendations, and we were going to hopefully get a vote on the recommendations for TAP.
So,
And then the budget committee member, we just added tonight.
okay, I mean, it's up to you.
Could we just, what happened? Could we move it to Wednesday, just the next day?
Or we can move it to 5:30 so that we can get done earlier, because nothing's going to be happening until,
Isn't that exec session at 4, starting at 4?
On the 3rd, there's the exec session starting at 4, so you would
That's
have
right.
you'd have to reschedule that probably if you wanted to.
never mind. We still have to do the exec session. So I have no problem with it.
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, what are we going to do other than look at the election? Isn't going to happen. I mean, we aren't going to get results probably for the national results anyway for
We'll
days.
probably lose all of our viewers
So.
unless we're more exciting in the election.
Do we have anybody watching tonight?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
the people on the right.
7 people on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's your list.
And they have the option to have their computer on here and their TV on here. So
Yes.
we're not losing them.
And.
And we'll be much more.
TV on in here too, so.
Yep. Can.
Oh, that'd be really effective.
That's where I used to be, meetings around Monday, so somebody was always watching Monday Night Football for us. The meetings always got done faster.
Okay, so this budget meeting is on the 10th, is that right?
At 4:30.
At 4:30. Regular meeting at 5:30. So we're just apprising the budget committee of the decisions we need to make.
Well, I mean, they don't have to be here for it, but it's just that we have new data.
Yeah.
And we want to share it and talk about it. And if they can make it, or they can zoom in.
You said there were applications for the budget committee,
Yeah, there was one previously and then I had another one that came in.
and I'm curious, should that be part of our meeting on the 3rd?
Yes, because we said we'll put appointments on if you want to do them.
Yeah,
You'll have the opportunity that night to make an appointment if you want.
that'd be fair, and then they could,
How many positions are open?
One, and there's now 2 applicants.
Okay.
What about the chair?
That would be replacing Richard Bertolotti turned out.
Right?
So
Yeah, but
you
then,
have to elect a new chair you have to elect a new chair every year.
right, but Jim Azamano also left.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he resigned. So we'll check. We may have 2 openings.
I'll look
And
at,
I don't know if he turned out. I'm sorry, we need to check.
okay, I'll check.
I think he terms out. I don't think he
Yeah, yeah.
turned out.
Okay,
Osmana didn't term out.
No, I mean, Richard. Bertolotti.
Richard, yeah,
Richard termed, I know for sure.
yeah.
I'll check.
It was a weird time. It didn't coincide with our budget calendar at all, so I can't recall what date that would be. But it's possible you have 2.
Yeah, the fact that the budget committee only meets at that short time window
Yeah,
makes it really weird.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, now,
And Jen, you have all those?
do you want to
Just
just
talked about?
Yeah, I have the information. We'll have to send an email out right away to the budget committee to make sure that they know about it. We'll go on the November 3rd meeting. We'll have the applicants. I'll check and see if we definitely have 1 or 2 positions. And then on the 10th, we'll have 4:30 with budget committee and at 5:30 work session. And then we need to talk about rescheduling the executive session on the 17th. So on the 17th, we had to move the planning commission meeting because it fell on Thanksgiving. And the date that worked for everybody was the 17th.
Oh.
So,
So we're this double booked that night?
and I have a list of, Bruce and I have a list of dates that Ashley's available. So we could possibly reschedule, sorry, Becky, reschedule your executive session
okay,
for another date. Ashley is available on the 12th, which you guys, that's the same week you already have a work session and the budget meeting. Monday, the 16th, which would be just the day before. He's also available the 18th, which is the day after. And then the 23rd or 24th, the following Monday or Tuesday, or Monday, the 30th. So there's quite a few days, mostly at the beginning of the week.
yeah, like 16th or 18th.
I can do all of them except Tuesday, except the 24th.
Guess I'd prefer the 18th.
I'm just fine with the 18th as well.
and I can do any of them.
Okay,
So
say
the
the 18th.
okay, so the
Sure. What time?
So originally the executive session was gonna be at 5:30. Do you guys want to stick with 5:30?
5:30, okay.
Okay, so now it's Wednesday, the 18th at 5:30.
Okay. Basically, we have meetings every single week, right?
Mhm.
Except Thanksgiving week, or do we got one that week?
Nothing yet. Would you like one?
It'll come.
Discussion's not over yet, and we are shooting for every day.
Okay.
Would you like us?
So on the 17th, what's the meeting?
Planning commission.
Okay, so we're not having to worry about that. Okay.
That was one that they definitely, they're gonna have continuation of items, so.
Okay.
They would have met on Thanksgiving.
The one thing I want to query the council about was that we had originally, earlier this year, talked about having the retreat in the November, December time period.
Brandon didn't like that idea.
Still don't. I'm just kidding, actually.
Now that we're got a couple new items that we're really focusing on, do we want to hold the retreat in January or February? And focus on these items that we're really working toward?
Given the workload that we have, I think if we need to do it in January or February.
Anything else?
What?
Given the workload that we have, I think it's kind of necessary that we do the retreat in January or February.
Yeah, I think we should have it as soon as we can, like January or February, but February is to me pretty late.
Yeah, we've always done it in January.
So let's do early in January for a retreat. But that will also kind of depend on where we go on some of the few topics that we are focusing on here. The code audit and elementary school discussion. So tentatively early January.
Yeah, Bruce sent an email today, was that correct? About the code audit?
For which?
The code audit, just that you didn't feel that we had enough time to adequately deal with that until after the first of the year.
Yeah, I had a discussion with Jeff. As a matter of fact, well, Karen's not here, but they both kind of snuck into my office and
And they kind of snuck in.
behind and looked big. Like, for example, with both of them, the traffic study is starting up. We've got two items that are likely to be continued either to the planning commission or come to you. And the two things now at Luba. The people next door to the Roberts have filed a Luba case just in case, kind of a thing. So we got two things with Luba. We got the Luba case coming forward on the first, the actual hearing. It's being written now, as far as our side of it. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on, plus, two new people coming in. So anyway, it's just, I think that we can move forward on the Cannon Beach Elementary for the first two meetings, because I think I can cover those and get us through those. After that, it's going to be a little more complicated as far as like tracking and putting together matrices and things like that about what people talked about, so you have data to make decisions from. So I think that between now and the first of the year, we can have first presentation, which will be from ZCS. And they're the people that looked at the buildings and said, these are the things, you're going to do it in four stages. And I told you in a memo. But the first is, you have to fix this right now, or the building's going to deteriorate further. The next one, you need to do this just so you can meet code, but you probably don't want to be in there. The next one would create a base level community center. And then the next level would be more, not all the bells and whistles, but would, have like a good sound system so that you could have really good productions, as opposed to just a loudspeaker kind of a thing. So those are, so we'll talk about those. And then potential financing things. And then the next part is, I think that we've got a lot to think about as far as the process. We have some plans that already exist. We have some people that have been waiting in the wings to say, I would like to see this. We have a lot of folks that have a vested interest, being, the tribes, multiple tribes, universities, all the, everybody else that's involved with this. And so trying to go ahead and decide how are we going to get there? And I'm writing up a proposal on that, but the Reader's Digest version on it is that you folks listen to what everybody wants to do, but you don't have to make decisions about specific programs. What we really need to know going into design is we have a gym. Okay, we know we have a gym. We're going to keep the gym. What are we going to do in the gym so that we know when we start design that we are able to go ahead and make sure the things that we want are included? And then I think the more tough decision will be, we have classrooms. Okay, and I think there's a lot of uses. If I recall, there was a proposal before where the classrooms were demolished and that became open space. And so I think that in listening, and again, why I want the data and what everybody's comments were, I think the tougher decision that you might be faced with is, do we demolish that building called the main building? Do we demolish that in order to create more space? Or do we say, well, we've got these, 4 great rooms that people can, do community meetings and those kind of things in. But I don't want you to feel that you have to decide what time this club goes into room 3 2 years from now. We're going to have to go through and get into a programming phase, but I don't think that we can make those decisions. I think we can make decisions, classrooms, yes, classrooms, no. What things we want to see in a gym, and then we can start concept design. But to try to go ahead and make all the, with all the lobbying that you're going to get, I don't think that you can do that because we don't know what the world's going to be like in 2 years. So that would be my proposal, and I'll be sending that out. And then Nancy had suggested, can we do that somehow like we did 4 Dunes? And so I'm trying to figure out some way to do that, even if it's virtual, but that we have a time frame, not as compressed as the last time, but we have a time frame where people can go ahead and come before you, and maybe it's over 2 months or something, every 2 weeks, or something along those lines. Hear what people have to say. Then at that, we cut it off, because again, we're not trying to decide we're going to do Brandon's proposal and Robin's proposal. It's, are you going in the gym or are you going in the classroom? Or are you going to be outside planting, Indian corn or something? I don't know. So with the type of decision that we need to make, I think that we'll have enough data at that point. You can go ahead and do that, and then we can go ahead and start hiring, or maybe even start the process to hire a design professional before that, and then just get going, and then everybody can have input into the design as it goes. So keep it simple, keep the decision simple, and not specific.
Let me go back to the beginning of this. So you're thinking about cutting the code audit meetings, the first and second meetings for
Yes.
beginning of next year?
There's too much going on, for prep. And then, again, transportation study, UBA, all these other things going on at the same time.
Okay, well, that cuts some timing on here, and puts more timing in January, February. Makes me re-ask the question, would we want to now put the retreat back into December so that we have some of those pre-discussions before we go into the code discussion?
I think that that's possible. I think that we could probably get just 2 meetings till you all say, okay, this is how we're going to move forward on Cannon Beach Elementary. And then maybe we have 1 more meeting for explanation. But I think that this does free up a bunch of time, your choice to go ahead and do a retreat. Then we have to decide at some point, because I think that we do want to give a priority to the code audit, that like maybe the first meeting, we say, okay, we're going to meet every 6 weeks. And I'm saying 6 weeks because there's gonna be a lot of work between each session to bring something back for everybody, that we set a 6-week schedule for a year. We don't have to use all the meetings, but everybody knows when those meetings are gonna be. And then we work around those like we do our regular meetings.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about that process. But this is not the time to talk about that
Right.
process, but yeah,
The joint meeting is to talk about process.
okay. So back to the question for the retreat.
The retreat and 2 meetings. 2 Cannon Beach meetings if we can.
Yeah, that's already, you've got that written here. I'm just going by what's written on your schedule, so that I'm just scratched the 2 code audit meetings,
Yeah.
which opened some time in November. If the council would like to do the retreat in one of these time periods. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, retreat in December sounds fine to me.
Okay. So the 8th, we have a work session and the 1st. So the following week after the work session,
15th.
15th?
You want,
I'm not saying the 15th, but that week of the 15th,
oh, the week of,
or anything
so far,
new?
everything's okay with me.
Thursday, the 17th would be design review board. And then the planning commission meeting in December is also going to be rescheduled because it would fall on Christmas Eve and we don't know what date that's going to be yet.
So are we talking about it like a full day retreat or just a couple of hour retreat, or how are we retreating?
You,
We talked about dividing it into 2 days last time. We talked
Oh,
about
that's
it.
true, we
2
didn't.
shorter time periods. We also have a day, we can use a different venue.
Say that again.
We could use the other venue, the Tullamore Hall, if we
Yeah.
wanted to.
Mhm.
It does feel slightly different.
I like it, Tim.
And I don't have to go back and forth like this all the time. So,
And don't forget, if we're talking about the week of the 15th, we switched the executive session to the 18th.
This is in November, though.
Yeah, November 18th.
that's November. We're
That's
just
one way you would.
December,
We're talking about December for the retreat.
Okay.
December.
I don't know, I think you'd be better off doing it early January than trying to slip it in there in December.
If I can speak to doing something for the retreat in November, December, it's that it will give you a chance to wrap in things like the code, how you want to do, what your expectations are of the code audit, Cannon Beach Elementary, because we won't have to start those meetings until that time. So prior to January, it might be, it's a planning meeting, and we'll hit the ground running in January for all those things.
Yeah.
So I would favor November, December.
I was looking at the wrong one. Maybe December would be better. Even early December.
Mhm.
Earlier than the 15th? The week of the 15th?
Yeah.
We don't have anything down for the 15th, do we yet?
Not yet.
Yeah,
For December?
like a good time.
Well, that's what day is that? That Tuesday?
It's a
Yeah.
Tuesday, but
But does that mean we'll be meeting somewhere else and having a full day retreat? Or again, it's a city council meeting day, isn't it? And I guess it's not. It's the third. That would be the third Tuesday.
Mhm.
yeah. that was-
That's the third, so there's not a council.
Okay.
Jen, do we know when planning commission will be in December?
I don't know now.
Okay.
On the 15th, we do have a public works committee meeting here in council chambers at 9 o'clock. So
Hmm.
that's the only meeting scheduled on the 15th that I'm aware
The 15th sounds fine. Why don't we say, what we did last year was just the morning. Remember. Started early and then we had lunch, yeah.
Yeah, we had lunch and
We
then
went on, but we didn't go the whole time.
we went until about 4 or 5 o'clock. It was a long day. Yeah.
It was a long day. I don't mind dividing it up, doing 2 days. We don't have to be consecutive either. We can do Tuesday, Thursday and split it up a little bit.
That's fine.
That's what I'd prefer.
Okay.
Tuesday and Thursday.
So let's tentatively, if place the 15th and 17th for the retreat. If Jen, if you could find out if Tolavana Hall would be available for those days.
Okay.
We'll go on that availability for first.
Do you want me to ask for all day or just morning?
Let's just do till 1 o'clock.
So 8 a.m. to 1?
So Monday morning. That way we're not killing ourselves going through a whole long day.
So we're talking about starting at 9?
9 to 1. Still get lunch. Takeout, it's okay.
And we'll have something for you to eat there. Sam, could you pull together everybody's comments as far as what they would like to see on the retreat so that we've got something to work from?
Right. I will start with last year's list and anybody have anything you want to add or subtract or emphasize, let me know. Other than that, we can just shoot through those topics and then we can go expand on some. Some of those we will already be expanding on because of the Kennebec Elementary School's discussions prior to that and the code discussions that we intend to have after that. So.
Can that list be resent to us?
Yeah, I hope so. If I can find it.
Then we could look and see after that what we think should be included if we don't think it's
Right.
on there.
Because this year's been weird and there's always new stuff.
Jennifer, can you tell me again what time we're starting the council or executive session on November 3rd?
November 3rd, executive session starts at 4 p.m.
PM? Okay.
So I'm going to switch around real quick. Just so you guys know, for budget committee, there is only one open spot because Jim actually left before the May meetings and Alicia Blaylock replaced him.
Okay.
So I checked, there is only the one.
Okay, thanks.
There, that covers everything.
Well, one thing, are we going to set the CBE meeting?
Yeah, we need to
Yeah,
do
we have multiple dates as possible, so you have to pick two.
Okay. So the first one is either 26, 27th, 29th,
Is either what?
26, 27, or 29,
Of what?
October, sorry.
Oh,
Because other spaces opened up, I think it would be better for everybody if we could go to the 4th or the 5th. We can make those other ones if that's what, just a little bit of a rush to produce the document.
Okay.
I can do it on the 4th. I can't do it on the 5th.
Say the 4th.
what time?
Wait, which one is this?
Okay, we're now doing the Kennebec Elementary School discussion, November 4th.
And we talked about the costs, Mike.
Yeah, no.
That was the meeting, yeah.
On date.
Is that at 5:30?
5:30. Now you have another one listed here. Kennebec Elementary discussion, process discussion,
Mhm.
for either the 2nd or the 9th. Which,
Is there a reason you would have the one on the 4th and then the one on the 6th?
well, the 4th what was originally the code audit discussion. It
Okay.
got moved. But that got taken away, so we moved the
To the
school
elementary,
discussion to the 4th,
right.
which kind of bumps the one you want for process.
Right. To the 9th?
I don't know. Do you have a choice?
The week of the 9th, would any time in there would probably be fine. Then Um,
We already have something on the 10th, so.
Yeah,
This Veterans Day.
Can they be both done on the 4th?
no, it's gonna be an awful lot of material.
Okay.
And also it's like, two very different subjects. So it would be hard to, it would be hard for me to change direction on that.
And we wait until the 17th.
You can't do the 17th because that's planning commission.
Oh, yeah, right,
The 18th, you have your executive session.
right.
The 19th is design review board. So you can do the 16th if you want to do that week.
Would the 12th be too soon after the
No,
4th?
no,
12th? Everybody okay with the 12th?
it's at 5:30.
Probably. Might as well stick with 5:30 because it's,
Doing a 12th?
12th at 5:30.
that's process. Thank you. And we'll send out a,
Almost every day of the week now.
well, I think, in the executive session on the 18th, we kind of lightened up a lot. Through December and,
But plenty of things we can put in there now.
oh yeah, I'm trying to think already. Making stuff up as we talk. Thank you, and, yeah, I'm just pushing on these schedules because I know that they're important to you and I don't want to see them get lost.
Okay, good in order.
Take your vitamins. That would be my guess.
Dinner. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.